welcome to another edition of the Energy Week podcast. Ryan Ray alongside the one and only Dr. Ellen Wald herself. Ellen, I'm not even going to ask how's this going because our beloved Celtics have been getting beat up by the Milwaukee Does.
That was so painful. It was insane. I mean, sorry, I'm just going to digress for 1 minute and talk about this. I think that, what's his name? AntiShell. Apparently in like a series last year, he had a total of 53 free throws. He now, 3 games in, has the total of 50. Come on, guys.
I think Kyrie Irving would echo your sentiments about the series and the game so far.
And he didn't get fined for it either.
Yeah.
Which is impressive.
That is impressive. So, just to digress a little bit, I was watching the Nuggets and Trailblazers game, and there was a stretch of like 5 minutes where the refs, it was just horrid officiating. So it's not just us that are on the bad end of that, I guess you could say. So, with that being said, we have a lot of stuff to get into, so let's do that now. Starting with U.S. Commerce Secretary, according to Reuters, this is, government cannot ensure cheaper U.S. oil sales to India. Now, that headline reads as a no-brainer, but, it's, but Ellen, I mean, there's an article being written, and of course, this probably will tie into some of the Trump tweets from this weekend, which I don't think we have a story. Do we have a story directly on that or not? We might want to cover those.
Alternative headline.
Yeah.
Wilber Ross explains capitalism to India.
Yeah. I didn't understand what's going on here. I mean, because India surely knows this as well. So what's the deal here?
Here's what I think is going on. India is pissed because they're being pressured by the U.S. to basically stop importing Iranian oil and to stop importing Venezuelan oil. And India's looking around going, come on, guys, like, you got to throw us a bone here if we're going to, like, we want to, play along with you. But, what do you expect us to do? And so it's clear that they've, were asked if, hey, can you help us out? Like, we'll buy your oil, U.S., but can you sell it to us at better prices, to maybe lower than we would have bought from Iran, because Iran was already selling it at a discount.
Right.
And so the answer makes a lot of sense. He's like, no, I can't offer you discounts. I'm just Commerce Secretary.
Right. You
want to go and ask Occidental or Chevron or Exxon if they're going to give you a lower price, then be my guest. But the United States can't do that. And I think it shows. What it really shows is that India wants to play along, but the United States is making it very difficult, pressuring them from all sides here.
Well, so 2 things. One, India is the country we talked about that has high oil prices gasoline prices because they tax this dog out of their oil, if I remember correctly. But with that being said, speaking of taxes, should the government consider giving tax incentive breaks to companies who sell to India to incentivize that they buy from U.S. companies? So come out and say, well, if you sell to one of these people who are struggling through the tariffs, we'll actually give you a tax break or maybe maybe a tariff waiver or something like that to help the negotiations.
Can they do that? Is that a writ of attainder? To give a tax break to a specific business to incentivize it, or
Well, they're tariffing. Well, on the flip side, they are for instance, we covered a story this morning. They're charging Kinder Morgan. They did not give them a tariff waiver for their steel for their pipeline, so they are taxing you on the import side of things. So surely on the export side of things, they could give you some kind of credit. You would think. Yeah.
See, I would have said that if we still had that export ban, then they could do that, because they would give exemptions to the export ban, basically is this, in favor of our national security to do this. So if we still have the export ban, I'd say they could, but I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I wonder if we'll see something because they're really, I just think that they're really, I mean, Wilber Ross is right, but at the same time, I think they're getting to the point where they're being unreasonable, and you can't just keep leaning on India and not provide, and not help them out with other options.
Yeah, another thing I was going to ask you about specifically, we talked about the grade of oil that Iran sells. The U.S. doesn't really provide that, so is this a situation where the U.S. would be buying oil from somewhere similar to some blend similar to what Iran would be provided, and then reselling back to India, or would they be supplementing kind of the heavier crude for our light sweet crude here?
Well, that's really interesting. You know, uh, it's unclear. I mean, I'm sure they'd be happy to buy more expensive heavy crude if they could get a discount on light crude, in a way, so they could kind of play the swapping game. There's another aspect you were saying about like these kind of swaps is that one of the things that's going on right now is that Russia and China are buying, or they're not really buying Venezuelan crude, but they're taking it as payment for like money that they've loaned Venezuela, and then they're reselling it on the market. So like the Naraya refinery in India is actually owned by Rosneft, and so they could be getting oil from Rosneft that's really Venezuelan crude. So I think there's a lot more going on here. And I mean, maybe the US realizes this isn't like India stop whining.
Right.
Or, maybe they could help them out. I mean, look, India has a very long election process because they have like 1 billion people or more, I think. And so they hold their election in stages. And so there's an election on right now. And Modi, who's currently in power, is very much into the United States. He wants to be close to the United States. He's, a good relationship. But the Communist Party, which is challenging him, may not be, and has historically really been all about this like alternative way, or like third way. And so, if they get control, they could be like, hey, US, screw it. We don't have to follow what you say. We're going to do whatever we want and buy as much Iranian crude oil as we want. And that could really pose a problem. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in my mind, I think they should try to do something.
Yeah, despite the fact I'm a right-wing propagandist, I actually don't like any of this stuff, as you know. But if you are going to do it, it seems like you would want to. If the government's going to interfere with the market, it seems like you would logically interfere with a way that would help you get get what you want, which would be to incentivize the companies to do the things that you want to happen. And to me, it feels like, and just to kind of get off on this tangent maybe for a second, it feels like from Trump's tweets this weekend that I think he is more confident in the stability of the market than maybe I am. And I'm basing that primarily off of what happened in December when the Fed talked about raising rates and we lost the entire year's worth of gains in like a day. And so that means, despite the economic numbers, that maybe the market, the economy isn't quite as strong as we're being led to believe, or Trump believes, because if the Fed were to raise rates, we know theoretically what could happen. So to me, it just seems like, Trump's playing this game. He's playing this game. And the longer it goes, I think the less, I don't know, I could be wrong. I feel like the less likely his chances of winning are. And the final thing I'll say here is, I'm trying to import something from South Africa. The tariffs apply to me. They're 25%. And that has nothing to do with China. That has nothing to do with any of this stuff. And so it feels like, Trump, if he keeps down this path, Ellen, I don't know how much longer the American side of things we'll tolerate it, because you have not just big corporations like Kinder Morgan who didn't get a waiver. You have small individuals as well who are like, hey, why are we being lumped in here with these negotiations in China or India and all this stuff? So I don't know. I've used the analogy before, like he's kind of like Hitler in World War II. He's fighting too many wars on too many fronts, and I don't know. We'll see if it works out for him or not. But I'm not as optimistic as I used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it's one thing to say, okay, big business can handle it, but you're going to kill small businesses that are involved in international trade. And I had one more interesting thing, not to like digress on this too much, but so historically, the United States has actually helped or given. I know there's an example that I studied about in 1956, where the U.S. government gave, or they were prepared to give, basically exemptions to companies from collusion laws to enable them to basically coordinate oil supplies to get to England and France when the Suez Canal was closed. And so it's not like there isn't precedent for the U.S. saying like, okay, we will exempt you from these laws or something like that in order to, to do something that benefits national security.
Right. And if that wasn't enough Middle East talk for you, let's go now to the BBC. U.S. sends aircraft carrier and bomber task force to warn the Iranians, however we're going to say it on the show. So he's pushing for the end game here, if you will.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's interesting. One of my favorite things about this was that John Bolton made this, announcement, and he said that the U.S. will counter any attack with unrelenting force. And I love
right.
that because everybody always uses the term relentless when they actually mean unrelenting. And I only know this because I used it incorrectly for a really long time. I wanted to originally make the subtitle of my book, The Arabian Kingdom's Relentless Pursuit of Profit and Power. And it has led to a very long argument and many, many dictionaries, like what exactly does relentless mean? And it turns out that it was totally the wrong word. And I was like, well, I can't use unrelenting in a book title. So I'm very excited to see that Mr. Bolton has used unrelenting in its correctly and didn't do it. Like relentless is basically like a very negative term. It doesn't mean like do not relent. Unrelenting means that. So anyway, I was very happy to see him use it correctly. On the other hand, what in the world is going on in the Middle East? So they're like, there's some sort of credible threat. Okay, well, what kind of credible threat are we talking about? Iran was threatening to close the Straits of Hormuz. Is that really a credible threat? I mean, come on, they threaten this like every other month, and the market goes up a little bit, and then they're like, oh yeah, wait, they can't actually do that. And the U.S. has a giant navy, so now we're sending some ships out into the Persian Gulf or to the Middle East or wherever. Part of me was thinking, okay, so say they actually send this stuff into the Persian Gulf. Like, have you looked at the Straits of Hormuz? It's a tiny passages. Like you can barely have two ships, one going either way in there. Just imagine if you add a giant aircraft carrier to that, that would slow down traffic just by virtue of slowing it down.
And let's add, here's his quote. He put, this is from the BBC again. He added, quote, "The United States is not seeking war with the Iranian regime, but we are fully prepared to respond to any attack, whether by proxy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or regular Iranian forces." And the by proxy is what caught me off guard there, because you're kind of throwing a wide net that kind of says, well, we're going to be loosely interpreting the rules of what would engage us. Now, not to get into too much of a history thing, I found it a little bit ironic that Abraham Lincoln's carrier group, is the group going down there. And if you go back and look at how the Civil War was started, it was kind of a very small skirmish that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So I just kind of felt that interesting.
Where's that? Do we know where was that? Where were those? Where was that carrier strike group? Where was it before it was retasked?
I don't know, but let me ask you this. I heard someone the other day bring this up, that they said that since Trump has brought on Bolton, in their opinion, that they feel like the international negotiations have gone south. They pointed North Korea. They felt like there was some progress being made with North Korea, and then Bolton came along. They pointed China's not been done, and they pointed some of the Middle Eastern stuff as well. Any thoughts or comments on how Bolton's handled some of this stuff, and maybe people look at him as a little bit more hawkish than Tillerson, and they're not as confident that they're going to get the fair negotiation with him?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think when he appointed Bolton, wasn't it around the same time that he got rid of Rex Tillerson?
Yeah.
And so people were like, "Oh, this is a clear shift in policy." Like Bolton's always been very, very clear about his thoughts on this. It's not a secret that he probably wants to go to war against Iran. I don't think he I don't know if he would really go to war. I don't think Trump wants to go to war at all. I think that he's made it pretty clear that he's run on why are we fighting all of these wars all the time, and made it pretty clear that he's not but I don't think that Bolton is one of those people. And it's kind of, I just find it really disturbing how quickly, I know they like to call them neocons, but I don't really like that term anymore. I don't think it means what it used to mean, but how quickly a lot of these people, like Bolton being one of them, they want to just send everyone to war. Now, does sending an aircraft carrier to the Middle East mean we're going to go to war? No, it doesn't. And maybe that aircraft carrier was like, should have been, maybe we should have had it there for months to say, Iran, like, stop sending ships. And we know for a fact that Iran is sending these little ships to Yemen filled with stuff. I actually had a student once, I probably told the story before, I had a student who I teach at a school that we're near a naval air base. So sometimes I get students who like are taking classes while they're, or would just finish with their deployments or whatever. And she was on a helicopter crew and they were stationed in the Persian Gulf. And she's like, we would sit on that boat and we would watch these little Iranian boats like zing past us from Iran to Yemen, and there was nothing we could do. So, I mean, maybe they've decided there is something they can do. I don't think it has to do with closing the Straits of Hormuz, though. So I don't think the oil market should be particularly worried. But as some people have said, well, like the more big guns you put there, the more opportunity there is to use them.
Right. So you mentioned naval base. I got to ask you, I saw a headline yesterday about a plane crashing, a naval plane, I think it was, Army plane, crashing near your area.
Yeah. So that actually was right near me. I saw those headlines soon, and they're like plane crashes into a river in Jacksonville, and I was like, well, the airport is nowhere near the river, like the commercial airport. Okay. So I figured it had to be. But there are two naval air bases. One's in Jacksonville, one's out near Jacksonville Beach. But the one in Jacksonville is right on the river. Like if I'm about a block from the river. And like if I walk out there, like either to someone's backyard I can see the naval air base. Like we can see they have the Blue Angels come like every so often, and we can see them from there. And so it was apparently a charter flight coming from Guantanamo Bay with like family, like with some civilians and families and some military personnel, and it just like landed in the water. I mean, it was insane. I don't think I heard it or saw it. We were having huge thunderstorms.
Oh, okay.
But it's still sitting in the river. And they're now concerned about the fuel, like damaging all of the environment. And apparently this is so sad. So, I mean, all the people got off, which is great. But there were pets in the...
oh, no.
And they must all be dead because they were sitting in, like, with baggage. So, oh my gosh. I hate... People who know me know that I like can't watch movies where animals die because it makes me incredibly upset. So, it's very exciting. Same time, I wanted to like go out and see the plane in the river. Apparently, it's still there.
How deep is the river there?
It's pretty deep.
Okay.
I mean, it's a big river. Like St. John's goes all the way down like to Orlando, I think.
See, that's one thing about when I was in Louisiana. You know, we have pretty deep and pretty wide rivers. And coming over to Texas, you know, everything's bigger in Texas. Well, there's a river, you know, across the street from me, and it's, you know, right now it's up because all the rain, but you know, in the summertime it's you know knee deep or you know maybe 10 feet deep depending on where you go. And so I've learned that all rivers aren't necessarily deep and wide like I was led to believe in the swampy state of Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, we get cruise ships can come into the port. Okay. Yeah, the Jack's port is huge. I don't know if it's as big, like the river's as deep there. Like I don't think you can get a cruise ship on that part of the river.
So the plane can sink to the bottom and be submerged.
It could. It's not submerged. It's like right at the edge. It was like right near the runway. I
gotcha. Okay. All right. Now let's get back to we'll stay in the water, but we'll go to the we'll go to the other side of the world. Egypt warns Turkey against drilling in Eastern Mediterranean. This was an interesting article here because it seems like the issue was over natural gas drilling, which, it seemed like at this point in time we hear about natural gas, it's not coming up. And then you get some countries who were jockeying for some offshore natural gas drilling.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because it's, of course, has to do with Cyprus, and Turkey's always kind of thought that Cyprus should be theirs, I guess, even though like the Greeks also think it should be theirs. It's kind of bizarre. But so Turkey announced its intention to exploit the Eastern Mediterranean for oil and gas. And it's basically saying that, so Egypt and Cyprus have this agreement for the utilization of natural resources in the Eastern Mediterranean's economic zone. And they're like, we don't care. We don't think that's valid. We're going to go explore for natural gas. And you can understand why Turkey is looking for any natural gas it can. It does a lot of transportation of natural gas, but it doesn't really have its own. Right now, it gets a lot of natural gas from Iran, believe it or not. We're starting to get some from Azerbaijan, but still, like, I can see why Turkey would love to become a natural gas producer, even if it means going all the way out into the Mediterranean for it. So, I think you don't normally hear about like Egypt and Turkey and Cyprus as, heating up, but I would not like discount this, because there is, Egypt's already involved in natural gas drilling in the Mediterranean. You've got Israel out there drilling for natural gas too. I mean, I can understand why Turkey wants a piece of this.
Yeah, and you mentioned Israel, and you got Egypt, and you got Turkey. Those aren't exactly all three allies of each other. There's a little bit of tension between those three.
Yeah, exactly. And this is so it says that Turkey is apparently the only country to recognize the breakaway Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which doesn't have any diplomatic relations with the internationally recognized government of Greek Cyprus. And they claim that part of the Cyprus offshore area remains under the jurisdiction of Turkish Cypriots, or Turkey. So part of me wonders if this is actually more a ploy to bring up the issue of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, as opposed to actually drill for natural gas.
Maybe so. That's a good point. Okay. Now let's talk to a follow-up from last week. We talked about Russia and their dirty, nasty, stinking oil. We've got a piece from you on Forbes. We also have some small-name publication from Reuters. I don't know who they are. But no, Belarus does not know when clean Russian oil flows to Europe will resume. According to a source. And then we also have your piece on Forbes, which is titled Russian Contaminates Its Oil, and it is finally forced to cut oil production. Finally is a key word there.
Yeah. They've been saying so apparently it's supposed to cut like 2% or something like that. A little less. I don't know. What did I say in the article? I wrote this. 2%. I should know. 2%. Yeah. So it's supposed to cut 2%, and they say, we will. Yeah, we haven't. We're not. Sorry. Right. We didn't. Sorry, guys, come back next time. And now all of a sudden they cut 10% of their oil production for about 10 days, maybe. But here's the kicker. So looking at this, so basically this pipeline goes to Belarus, and then it like sends oil to a lot of other places in Europe. So that's why Belarus is important. Not that I'm implying that Belarus isn't important on its own. I'm sure it's an amazing place. However, it's important to our purposes because it's like a key transit hub for all of this oil. It's a 1 million barrel per day pipeline. And apparently the word on the street was that they were getting clean oil already. And now the Belarusian state oil firm is like, we don't know when we're getting clean oil. We haven't seen it yet. Part of the problem is what I've been learning is that it's not just is that this contaminated oil is a huge, huge problem. So it's still in the pipeline. So before you can get the clean oil in, you've got to finish pumping all of the dirty oil, and they don't know what to do with it. There's nowhere to put it. Apparently they don't have storage tanks. Nobody wants to buy it. There's some Russian firm trying to mix it with clean oil and like sell it at a discount, and people are like, no, we don't want that stuff. So it's a big deal. Like personally, I would not put it by the Russians. So let's just like spill it out somewhere.
Well, I wonder,
horrible.
I don't deal much in the used oil business, but used motor oil you can they'll take and refine it and make a lot of products out of it. And that the specs on that is pretty wide open. So I'm curious what if you can even get to that market, you might save a little bit of money. But you mentioned shutting it down. I'm assuming they're going to have to pig the line too, huh, Ellen? So it's not just going to be shut it down and flow. I mean, not just flow all the contaminated oil. They're probably going to have to pig all these this line, which you can't do that overnight either.
Oh yeah, I think it's part of the. How long is this line? I think I said it's 3,400 miles. It's 3,400 miles.
Yeah.
This pipeline. So yeah, so I think they really don't. I think first of all, most people don't understand what goes into this. So when the word came down, like, oh, clean oil is flowing again. People are like, oh, great. But they don't realize that this is actually a really significant issue, and they've got to clean, there's a lot more, like you were saying, has to be done here. But then there's the issue of what are they going to do with all this contaminated oil? I mean, I wonder, like, can you like, can you stick it into tankers and like bring it back and tell them to like clean it this time? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you get organic chloride out of oil, but presumably if you there is a process that it goes through to get it out, and they didn't do that. But what I love about this whole thing, and that's why I picked the picture of my Forbes article, you've got the CEO of Transneft, this like old balding kind of large man, and he's sitting at a table. It's a small table across from Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin is like sitting there, his hands crossed in front of him. He looks like he is gonna like take one of the pens from the jar next to him and like pull out the guy's heart with it.
Yeah. You're costing me money, dude. Me directly, me. Yeah,
worse.
Or dead. You could be dead, and we wouldn't do it.
And now apparently there's some sort of fire on a natural gas pipeline. It's just like Russia's oil and energy is blowing up literally in their face right now.
Yeah, and this it just goes to show me I don't know why we're so scared of Russia. They really struggle to get their act together. So, anyways,
did you see that plane that exploded there too?
Oh, I didn't hear about that. What happened?
Oh, there was a Russian-made plane that, like, well, apparently it was hit by lightning, or they claim it was hit by lightning, but it like had to do an emergency landing in Russia's big airport, and it like burst into flames, and like 41 people died. It was awful.
No,
but apparently this is not the first time they've had these problems with these Russian-made jets. So.
Okay. Well, let's go back to I said we don't have anything about Trump, and I lied. Here we do. I forgot about this article. According to Reuters, from Trump's Twitter feed, I'm supposing oil prices touch 1 month low after Trump's tariff threat. Oil prices fell on Monday after U.S. President Donald Trump said he would sharply raise tariffs on Chinese goods, risking derailment of trade talks between the two world's largest economies, which renewed worries about global oil demand. So, help me out here. Wouldn't it be the opposite? That if there's going to be tension, that would raise the price? Why do they think the market's falling based upon that?
Apparently, it's a multi-step process. So, if we don't get a resolution to the trade war, then we're going to have a global recession, and then oil demand is going to go down, and therefore prices will fall. So we've skipped 5 steps in there.
Okay, basically. We're just going ahead and get to the last step right now. So
yeah, like someone must have programmed their computer algorithms to be like, negative Trump tweet on China, sell oil.
Yeah, here's your unrelenting force quote from John Bolton. The deployment sends a clear message to Iran that any attack on U.S. interests or its allies will be met with unrelenting force. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. So he's a National Security Advisor. Tillerson was the Secretary of State, so not the same position, but it was the same time that they did the swap there. When does this end? Because I talked to someone a few months ago when I was trying to work on this steel bringing stuff in, and I was like, hey, these tariffs are killing me. It's a lot of money. What do we need to do? And his opinion at the time was he thought the tariffs could be done by this time of the year. They're not done yet, Ellen. And lucky for me, I haven't brought the steel in, so I hadn't had to pay them, but it's a coming here before too long. So, and raising them up is not exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, I mean,
give me some good news.
I don't know. I think that they lost a good bargaining chip that they had when they decided to end the waivers for Iranian oil. I thought that could have been a really good bargaining chip for China. And so I think we're going through the same thing again and again. Like Trump said, talks break down. He says he's going to raise tariffs, and then they restart at some point. Like, I foresee another, round or two of this before we get anything. I wonder though if, as the 2020 election years, if Trump will feel more pressure to get something done. Although you never know with him, he may run on this standing up to China thing. And
Yeah,
unless you're actually trying to import something or export, you may not really understand it, and you just buy his, we're standing
right,
up to China.
right. It's interesting because I've thought about this some. I don't think we've talked about it on this show. Maybe we did. You can remind me. But you know, now the Democrats are in an interesting spot because they, of all the Russia investigations that have been going on. But theoretically, if you were a Democratic nominee, it seems that you might want to come out as running on the side that can negotiate with, China, Iran, North Korea, and really kind of throw it back into Trump's face if he doesn't get anything done that he hasn't gotten it done, which then might embolden these countries not to do a deal with Trump and wait to see what happens with the election, which could backfire on him. So I really think his timetable to get
Idiots,
this
all
deal
of
done.
them. The Democrats, like, why are they not doing this? Like,
Yeah,
stop talking about the Russia collusion and run on this. Like,
right.
really, like, I mean, yeah, this is the perfect election strategy. I mean, Iran is already doing that. Iran has already decided we're waiting out to see what happens. We're
Right.
not going to do anything until we see who's going to be the next U.S. president, because it makes sense at this point. If a Democrat's elected, then everything, it's all off,
Right. It's all off, and you won. And of course, if they lose and Trump wins, then he's probably going to lay the hammer on you. But I don't know why there's not more talk of that. That to me, if you really wanted to crumple Trump's strength, it would be you would go against him on these policies. Whether or not you're going to keep your promises, we know politicians are liars, but you at least publicly go against him just to weaken his position there and try to hope that helps you out. But I don't know why we
I
do that. That's free
honestly wonder
advice.
if it's just that they don't understand that, like, they think, like, because it's all identity, or either they don't get it, or they're so focused on destroying each other right now, and maybe someone will actually bring that up as a viable strategy once
Right.
they actually have a candidate and they start running a national campaign as opposed to just primaries.
Yeah,
Because
maybe so. I think I'll just say this real quick. I listened to one. I won't mention one of the candidates. His announcement speech. It's a male, so that narrows it down. But his announcement
not
speech.
really. Just like,
Well, we've taken
there are a
Kamala
lot of
Harris
people
out and
running here.
Elizabeth Warren. But I listened to his announcement speech, and I listened to some of like one or two of his follow-up interviews, and literally he had no platform, no policy, no agenda that he was actually running on. It was just a lot of fluff, and it was like, there are tangible issues here that you could actually address, and that's coming from a right wing propagandist. So keep that
Oh,
for what it's
yes.
worth. Okay, now this story is one that we've been covering on the Text One Gas podcast. I'm glad you brought it up here because this is fascinating. This Occidental, Anadarko, Chevron, Buffett coming in here now. The angle I want to ask you about some other stuff that's not necessarily covered in this. But Buffett says that this is from CNBC. Buffett says Occidental Petroleum investment is a bet on oil prices over the long term. Buffett says his Berkshire Hathaway $10 billion investment in Occidental Petroleum is a bet on oil prices over the long term, and it's also a bet that the fact that the Permian Basin is what it is cracked up to be. I had to read that 3 times to make sure I didn't I didn't misread it, but it is what it is cracked up to be.
What
This
exactly is that, Mr. Buffett?
well,
Like, I want to know. Like, what does he think yeah, like, what is that?
So I took that to mean that for your Art Bermans of the world and folks that are really anti, or at least put out an anti-shell narrative, it seems like it was a kind of a kick to the teeth to them that they are saying that there is a path forward for the shell producers. Now I've made it clear on this show. I think that path forward really has to do with more larger companies that can process, that can drill it, move it, and refine it themselves. I think that's the path forward. I'm not saying that's going to be the only path, but I think that's the main path. And I think Chevron and Exxon and ConocoPhillips are companies that can do that kind of thing. But then you get a guy like Buffett who, Buffett's wrong in the past, so we can't say he's the holy grail. But him going here on the Permian's one thing, but I think the other thing, Ellen, we talked about a lot, is he's looking at oil demand long term, and he's seeing it going up and to the right. Doesn't mean it's not going to have a dip, but he really believes it's going up and to the right. And I think that's a narrative that we talked about before. When you look at the continent of Africa, and as they become more and more emerging to first world, the amount of oil and gas you have to use is just hard to see unless something really radical changes. Oil demand over the long term going up and to the right. And it seems like Buffett's playing that strategy, and he believes that the Permian can be a player in that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not like one of those guys people who thinks that Warren Buffett is like God when it comes to these things, but he's not stupid, that's for sure. If you want to look at like stupid things, I was looking at this thing from McKinsey, and they believe that after a century of rapid growth, energy demand, all energy, energy demand is going to plateau in 2030.
Yeah, that's
that energy demand is not. They think it will no longer be related to growth. Are they stupid?
Yeah. See, there's no way they believe that. I just don't believe. Okay, there may be someone in the company that believes that, but there's no way the company as a whole actually believes it. I don't buy it unless you are firmly believing that in 2030 we're going back to the Stone Ages and like.
Yeah, here are the ways that energy demand will no longer be linked to economic growth. If there's a giant tsunami that wipes out massive, amounts of the population of the Earth,
right.
If we have an asteroid hit, or we have some sort of like terrible plague that kills people. I mean, basically the only solution is like something that kills everybody, because even if you switch to renewable sources of energy, you're still going to need energy. And like people talk about these like, AI robots in factories. Guess what? They run on energy. They don't eat food like people who used to work in factories. So you've got to feed them energy. You can't feed them corn.
No, you're exactly right. And to echo your sentiment, I don't think Buffett's a god either, but I do think when someone puts $10 billion of their own money in there, you should at least go, okay, he's putting his money where his mouth is. It's not a blog post. It's not some silly tweet. There's something that he's seeing here that I think should be accounted for. Now, obviously, we both think that long-term energy demand is not going anywhere but up. We might disagree on the percentage or the rate, whatever, but it's got to go up for all the reasons you said. But the other thing I thought was interesting here, and I don't think this article deals with it directly, but Occidental has agreed to sell off Anadarko's African assets to Total. And I mentioned, I don't know if it's on here or somewhere else, I was curious to see how much that would play in, because Chevron seemed to be a better position to deal with those assets. But they're getting $10 billion backing from Buffett. They're getting $8 billion from the Total sales. So that's $18 billion. Let's call it $19 billion. That's 1/3 of the $57 billion, I think it was, they really put up. They're getting, and they've changed their offer to, I think it's 50%, maybe it's 20% stock, 70% cash. They renegotiated the terms of the offer to put a lot more cash in there. But so you just take Buffett out of it. The fact that you have two players who are fighting over Permian assets like this, I do think we have to look at and say there's a lot of stuff that goes on the Permian that me and you would say this doesn't make sense. How they make money, how does it make it work long? But there's definitely something there that these big companies are seeing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing them bid crazy amounts of money for some Anadarko assets.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, and I think what Warren Buffett's he's saying it's a bet on long term. That makes sense as opposed to some of the other things that we hear. What I really want to know is if Occidental fails and they go to Chevron, or Chevron fails and they go to Occidental, like do either of these companies have like a second choice that they're going to be looking to acquire?
I was talking to someone the other day, and they said that if you look at the map of Chevron's current, and I haven't verified this, this is what someone told me. If you look at Chevron's current assets and Oxy's current assets, that Anadarko's positioning is right there. That makes sense with them. So if that's the key strategic thing here, then maybe not. But I would imagine, regardless, with $50 billion, you can go buy a lot of assets and make your map look, a lot of the same color, if you will, so you can match up your acreage. Once this is done, I do think you are going to see it. I read a headline the other day. You may have seen this. I didn't read the article, but it alluded to the fact that maybe Pioneer is looking for the same kind of thing that Anadarko is getting here. They're looking to sell off their assets. Now, Pioneer, to remind everyone, here it is. This is from the Dallas Morning News, or DallasNews.com rather. Headline: Pioneer Natural Resources looks to cut costs with generous buyout offer. Pioneer Natural Resources is looking to eliminate potentially hundreds of jobs with what describes as generous voluntary buyout. Oh, Wrong kind of buyout. Never mind. Okay, so I read the headline. I read the headline and I thought they were looking for a sale. So, but no, there's an article somewhere. I have to find it for next episode. But Pioneer looking to sell. So maybe you would see somewhere where Pioneer, who has sold off all their assets except for the Permian Basin. That's all they're looking to do is Permian Basin work, and they might be looking to, to sell to a Chevron or an Occidental or whoever the case may be to unload some of their stuff as well.
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, my sense is that this is not the last that we'll see of this. This may be the biggest or the first, but I don't think it's the last.
No, it's not going to be the last for sure. I think Drilling Info has predicted they're expecting a lot of M&A activity coming up. Now, we'll apologize to the listeners here quick, Ellen. We haven't covered Elon Musk here recently, and there's been some stories out. We didn't get a chance to review them, so let's just wait, I guess, till next week when we can prep for what's going on with Elon's segment fully, because we want to give him the full credit that he deserves. And
we needed to prep for a really, really big Elon Musk. What is going on there?
Yeah, need to get that ready. But in the meantime,
so if you're listening, send us what topics would you like us to talk about when it comes to Elon Musk and Tesla.
Yes. Oh, and we did have someone tweet in a topic, and we forgot to get it, but we'll get it next week. This is from @ManUnitedForever, very smart listener, Man United fan. Nice discussions. Can you and Ryan Ray Sr. cover on Energy Week podcast the enormous inventory build that we've seen yesterday? This was on May 2nd. From the EIA, and why the refineries are lacking behind to process all that inventory when summer is about to start. I did not do any research into that, so we can talk that next week, I guess, Emma. We'll put that on the discussion next week.
I think that's also a great question for Dean Foreman. So next time he's on the podcast, I'm going to write that. I'm going to ask him if he can talk to this, because he's been talking about these massive refinery runs for so long and how they've really been kind of helping things out there. I think all right. Promise, we're going to talk about that.
Okay. All right. So we got it in the notes to make sure it gets discussed. In the meantime, Ellen, until we're back next week, obviously you will be on Twitter talking about the Celtics slaying the Does.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Exactly.
Where else will you be?
I will be, let's see, I was already on Bloomberg Radio, but I'll try to post that link if I get it. And, I did want to mention this. So I'm on Business Insider. Cool. For those people who are interested, this isn't really an oil market issue, but it's kind of about investing in Saudi markets. And they did a whole deep dive into what exactly are some of the issues in investing in Saudi Arabia and Saudi markets, especially because the FTSE Russell and the MSCI are going to be folding Saudi Arabia's stock market into their emerging market indices this year. And so what kind of risks are there? And I talk about a lot of the issues going on, particularly with Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy. And in the end of the day, really the biggest player in the Saudi markets is going to be the government. So right. I will put that link in the show notes, but it was really interesting. There are a lot of other interesting people who were interviewed and had good comments. Okay.
And a couple of little house cleaning notes here. I did speak to Nate about the audio issue that was sent out a few weeks ago, and he told me that he went back and looked into it and should be better. So if it's not, I can't remember the listener's name, but energyweekpodcast.com is the website, so you can go see it there. Also, we're now recording video, so I'm not sure how Nate will cut this up, but we'll be cutting these up, or we're playing the whole episodes, or whatever Nate likes and does will be posted on LinkedIn and Twitter and maybe YouTube or wherever he's going to post it at. If it doesn't work out well, then blame Nate, obviously. Don't blame Mel and myself. We're in here giving out free Democratic primary candidates advice and stock advice and everything else advice while being right-wing propagandists. I will be on the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast and Oil and Gas Contractors Connect. Next week, I will be in Denver, Colorado for the Doug Rockies Conference, which is Tuesday and Wednesday, which is, if I can pull it up here, I think that's the 14th and 15th. Let me see here. Yes, the 14th and 15th. So if you're in the Denver area, go into the conference, connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to meet up with you. If not, we will talk to you next week.
Bye.